What's going on, everyone? Dots Gaming here, and today's video is going to be covering if The Elder Scrolls Online is worth playing in 2021. Now, I've been playing this game for about 4 years and have made tons of content on it, although I've recently moved away from exclusively making ESO content to doing more of a general MMORPG focus. Now, I did also make one of these videos last year and people really did like the review, so I wanted to update this video for 2021, especially since my opinions have evolved and changed a bit. Now, we're going to be breaking down this review into 4 sections: about, pros, cons, and summary, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll know if ESO is a game that you should give a shot in the upcoming year. So without further ado, let's get started. The Elder Scrolls Online is an MMORPG set in the Elder Scrolls universe. The game has action combat, so it's not your tab targeting combat like WoW. It has more action combat where you have to, use your character's basic attack as well as their skills, dodge, block, etc. Now, the levels go from 1 to 50 for each character, and there also is endgame progression in the game called champion points, which are account-wide, with the max level of those champion points being 3,600. Now, there are fully voice-acted quests, so you can really get into the questing for the game, very similar to other test titles. And there is horizontal endgame PvE progression for dungeons and raids, which in this game are called trials, that have multiple difficulty levels. There is extensive character building in The Elder Scrolls Online, which I'll discuss more in the pro section, as it's by far one of my favorite parts of the game. There's also open world PvP. There's a big PvP zone called Cyrodiil that has massive army fights. There's also a smaller world PvP zone where you can get into more like medium leveled fights called the Imperial City. And then there's also instanced PvP battlegrounds with 3 teams of 4 fighting for whatever the objective is. There's an amazing player housing system in ESO, definitely one of the better systems in the game. There's tons of places to explore, delves, dungeons, etc. Now, ESO also runs a guilds trader system instead of a traditional central auction house, and it makes for an interesting in-game economy, which honestly, the trading is like a game in and of itself, with guild politics and trying to get traders from the world to make your guild store public. It's a really interesting system that some people love and some people hate. Now, ESO releases 4 content updates per year. They release 3, which they call DLCs, and they're essentially like smaller additions to the game. Usually it's like a dungeon, a new story zone, or maybe like a new like a mini raid or something. And then they also will do 1 chapter per year, which is kind of synonymous to an expansion, and it'll usually have like a raid, a class/skill line, or a new system added, and then a new zone. ESO is also buy to play. It does not require a subscription, although the subscription does come with a ton of perks, and I have a video that kind of goes more into detail if you want to take a look at it. Now, the subscription ESO is not pay to win. Its primary function is to make inventory management significantly easier and automatically give you access to new DLCs as they come out. But do note that with the ESO Plus subscription, you still do need to buy the chapter from year to year. Now, the biggest thing that's upcoming in this year with the new chapter, which is called Blackwood, is going to be a system called Companions, which are basically kind of like NPC characters that can cast their own skills that you can have wear whatever outfits you want them to wear, and they go with you on your adventures. They have their own storyline, certain activities that they like and dislike, so you have almost like a rep with the companion themselves. They have like their own story quests that you have to follow and do stuff with them. The system is still being fleshed out, at the time of recording this video, as I'm recording this obviously before the chapter. So the system is still being fleshed out, but there are going to be, like I said, these NPC companions coming up in that new chapter, and these companions can even accompany you in dungeons and trials, which is pretty interesting. Now, moving into the pros about the game, as we've kind of gotten a good about section going, let's actually talk about the things that are really good with ESO. The first thing being the questing experience. Now, the quests in ESO are all fully voice acted, so you can really feel like you're a part of the in-game world. I know when I was a new player, I really did enjoy the questing experience compared to other MMOs that I've played. It's very sandboxy in nature, so you can kind of pick and choose whatever zones or whatever quest lines you want to do and when you want to do them. Now, there is also a thing in the game called a zone guide, which will basically allow you to follow the storylines in the zone, show you things to do in that zone, etc. So you don't feel like you're just doing random quests and not sure if they're relevant. You could really follow this to know that you're following that zone story. You can also play how you like. Now, while there are 6 classes in the game, you can customize how you play your class a ton. Every class has access to all the armor types, weapon types, as well as non-class specific skill lines. So you can combine your class skills, your non-class skills, armor passives, and all these different things to make a character build completely of your own. Now, if you do want help getting started in the building department, and if this seems a little bit overwhelming to you, I do have my own website with plenty of character builds called dotsgaming.com. Whether it be for PvP, PvE, solo questing, leveling, I have builds that cover everything on my site, and if you want to try something yourself, though, you can absolutely do that, because in ESO, you can truly build your character in a unique way that you find fun and enjoy the game how you want. Now, ESO also has really fun combat. The combat in ESO is one of the things that personally keeps me coming back. Now, it's not a tab targeting game like I mentioned earlier, but rather action combat. So you have to block, dodge roll, use your basic weapon attacks, as well as abilities all together for the most success in combat. Now, the combat, especially when you get to endgame, is fast-paced and really, really enjoyable. Now, with that being said, I know some people do really dislike the game's combat and find the weaving mechanic of having to use your basic attacks in between skills to be a bit clunky, but personally, I do enjoy it. But again, combat is kind of going to be a personal thing from person to person. Now, there is also horizontal PvE progression. You do not have to do X raid to get certain gear before you do Y raid. You can just pick and choose whatever end game raids you want to do. Maybe you want a gear set from a certain trial, which are, like I said, these are what ESO raids are called, and they consist of 12 people, but maybe you don't like a certain trial, so you don't do it, but maybe you want a skin from a certain one, so you do that one. You know, you can really pick and choose which endgame trials you want to do. You're not forced to do any endgame content you don't want to do. Now, there is no continuous gear treadmill. Now, like I said, with the max level being 50, that is just the start. Once you hit level 50, you get into that endgame progression called the champion point system, and these points are account-wide. So let's say you get to CP 50 and you want to make an alt. That alt will have access to those 50 champion points, and once you level that character from 1 to 50, they will instantaneously become CP 50 because that's the CP level of your account. Now, the champion point system has had a massive overhaul recently with that first patch of 2021, the Flames of Ambition patch, and I do have a video on my channel that covers it, but for a quick and dirty rundown, you can basically level up your character all the way to champion point level 3600, with about 2100 of the points being usable at the current moment. Now, while that level does sound absurdly high, because let's be honest, it is, they adjusted the experience curve of earning these champion points, so there isn't a ton more experience that you need to earn compared to the old system. Plus, ESO does run a ton of double experience events, so it can be really easy to grind out points in the system, but there's definitely a lot of point grinding ahead of you. But anyway, you invest these certain champion points into these things called stars. You can almost think of them into nodes that you can invest points into, and they give your character passive boosts, whether it be more of a resource, more damage mitigation, etc. Now, certain of these passive stars, though, do require being slotted in something called your champion bar to actually activate while others are active at all times. But again, if you do want a more deep dive guide into the system, refer to the guide that I have on my YouTube channel. But the reason I do mention the system here in this video is because it does play into the end game gearing, because that's what this point started at. So gear stops leveling at champion point 160. So once you hit CP 160, you will be able to wear max level gear across all of your champion point leveled characters. And this will not change. The game's gear level is CP 160. So as long as you hit that, you'll always be able to use max level gear. And the best part is that all of your characters do share a bank. So you can pass gear in between different characters, which prevent you from having to regrind gear over and over and over again for each character. Once you get gear, your account has the gear, not your character. Another thing is a personal one for me is PvP. It's an incredibly fun when it works. I want to make that disclaimer since it'll also play into my biggest con. PvP in this game is super, super fun. There's infinite customizability when it comes to making a build, so you can put something together that truly suits your playstyle. ESO PvP, though, does have a bit of a learning curve, but once you get it down, you'll really be able to appreciate the fun, fast-paced combat that comes with the game. The game also has a lot of outplay potential, which I really enjoy. So one person can, if they're good enough, take on a group of enemy players all by themselves, allowing for a display of skillful gameplay, which in my opinion is really cool. ESO PvP also does feature massive castle sieges in the PvP zone Cyrodiil, where the 3 factions in the game fight for dominance over the zone. And if you capture all of the castles surrounding the Imperial City, the person with the most PvP points for that alliance, which are called alliance points, is crowned the Emperor if you have it for that PvP cycle, because there's like different cycles where the points reset per cycle. And so if you have the most points for that cycle, you get crowned the Emperor, and you get a ton of rewards and power increases. There are also Daedric weapons that give their wielder incredible power, helping your faction fight back its enemies. So if you like this kind of large-scale PvP, you're really going to love Cyrodiil. But for those who like smaller engagements and instance PvP, the game does feature battlegrounds with various game modes where 3 teams fight to win the objective of the match. Another pro is that you can play with anyone. You can quest and play with anyone regardless of your faction or level due to the scaling within the game. This makes playing with friends and family who come to the game easier and puts less restrictions on playing with them. Keep in mind that the only time the faction restrictions do come into play is with that PvP zone Cyrodiil that I mentioned. There is also tons of content. The game has no shortage of content. Questing, PvP, in-game player housing, trials, dungeons, solo raids, trading, farming, crafting. ESO has hours and hours of content to keep you busy no matter what you enjoy. Now, moving into our cons section, ironically enough, the cons for me for ESO don't generally have to do with the game itself, but rather a lot of things surrounding the game. So my first and largest con for the game easily is the game's performance. The Elder Scrolls Online has a really bad reputation for having horrendous performance, and unfortunately it is true. During the primetime hours, that open world PvP zone I mentioned runs terribly. Between having low frame rates, your ping is going to spike around. Sometimes it will be okay, sometimes it won't. It's really just the luck of the draw from day to day. Even in trials, you'll sometimes get random frame rate issues in certain spots, and others it will be fine. In addition, a new type of performance problem was introduced in 2020, which has added a ton of ability lag to your skills, which happens sometimes. So sometimes you'll be trying to like weave your basic attacks with your skills, and your character just kind of like feels like it locks up and you can't do anything. And this gets extremely tilting when you're in a tough PvP fight and you just can't seem to finish off your opponent simply because the game won't let your character do anything. Now, with that being said, ZeniMax keeps saying they're trying to improve performance and are inspecting ways to fix the performance in the game. But with that being said, I have had the opinion when it comes to ESO performance improvements of I'll believe it when I see it. The first year of performance improvements that ZeniMax did in 2020 in general made my game run worse in some ways, again with that ability lag being a new performance problem that was added, but there have been some improvements in other areas. But for me, most of the improvements in terms of performance came in non-combat situations where most of the in-combat performance issues are still very present. Now, these issues are only exacerbated on consoles as well. For those who don't know, ESO is on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation 4, but note there is no crossplay. But these performance issues that I mentioned here are going to be worse on console than on PC due to console's current hardware limitations. My next con for ESO is bugs. ESO encapsulates the meme, 99 little bugs in the code, 99 little bugs in the code. You take one down, patch it around, 127 little bugs in the code. Now, these bug problems, as well as the performance issues that I just previously mentioned, aren't going to be felt as much by new players as much as it is felt by the end game player base who is engaging in high-level combat such as trials and PvP. There are some bugs in the game that have just kind of become a way of life. Combat bug, sprint bug, street bug, undo bug, blast bones bug, gap closer bug, CC break bug, mail not showing up and forcing you to switch zones to get it, getting stuck in weird areas, activity finder bug, health desyncs, and more. This is something that ZeniMax tries to fix from patch to patch. But while some patches aren't as bad in the bug department, others can really put a damper on your gameplay experience. My next con is going to be balance. Now, I'm not talking about X class being too strong or too weak, since that opinion is going to really depend on who you talk to. When I say balance, I'm referring to the wild nerf and buff swings that happen from patch to patch. Skills can be buffed, skills and gear can be buffed or nerfed by insane amounts from patch to patch, which can very much lead to change whiplash or gameplay fatigue when it comes to the end game player base. You'll finally get a build assembled and tested and enjoying it, and then a new patch is going to roll around and it's going to nuke your build and make it unviable. And it's a worry that you have to have. You know, you spend all this time assembling a character build and you have to worry, am I going to only enjoy this build for 8 weeks before I have to change the whole thing, or am I going to be able to run it for a little while? So definitely is something that needs to be considered. My next con is going to be end game content droughts. Now, while ESO does have a ton of questing and overland content to do, as an end game player, you can kind of blast through that content and it doesn't really have like any challenge to it. So as an end game player for PvE per year, you can really expect 4 dungeons, a raid, and then the Q4 release kind of varies. Sometimes it's another 12-person trial, sometimes it's an arena, which is like a solo or 4-person raid, and occasionally it's only the new story zone and nothing for end game players. PvP-wise, we have Cyrodiil, which is the open large-scale PvP, the instance battleground content, or the Imperial City, which is, like I mentioned, like a medium scale type of environment. And it's been that way for a while. From a PvP player, your experience generally comes from the enjoyment of combat itself, which can get strained if bugs and performance are really acting up. Now, a new con that I wanted to add to this year's video that has definitely been brought up to me a lot by people that I've interacted with is very easy overland content. So for those who do not know, overland content in ESO is basically the world content, such as questing through the stories, exploring delves, public dungeons, etc. Basically anything not instanced. Now, ESO's overland content is painfully easy, and it's a complaint that I've seen from a lot of newer players, and it's one that I echo myself. A good way to describe ESO's kind of questing experience is essentially it's like a graphic novel where you control a character. If you only care about experiencing a story and don't care about the difficulty of the quests themselves, you are going to love ESO's questing experience. The voice-acted quests and decision-making that impacts the worlds can very easily draw you in. But if you're looking for something that has any level of difficulty, I don't think you're going to enjoy it. Personally, I found it really jarring to spend hours going through a questline to face the big bad final boss of a questline only to absolutely beat his face in with 0 effort. Now, my final section is a should you play and slash like a summary type section. Now, if you're a hardcore raider, I'm going to say it kind of depends. The raids in ESO are actually really, really fun, and the mechanics are very interesting, and I personally find the combat enjoyable. But you may have to worry about longevity since, like I said, ESO releases 1 and maybe 2 trials per year, although they do release 4 dungeons. Performance, bugs, and balance concerns should also be something to keep in mind, as the endgame content in ESO is what's most heavily affected by the game's performance problems. Now, there was even a period of time in 2020 where trials were basically unplayable for 1 to 2 months due to game-breaking bugs. However, ESO's vet hard mode raids do pose quite the challenge for a raider. So that raid difficulty, combined with attempting to do the raid quickly and with no death for certain achievements, will give any hardcore raider a nice challenge. So raiding is really good in the game, definitely worth looking into, but again, keep some of those caveats that I did mention in mind. Now, if you're a PvPer, I'm going to give the same thing. It depends. If you're looking for ranked PvP, this is not the game for you. If you're looking for something more casual, if you're looking for massive large-scale fights, trying to fight multiple opponents outnumbered, and giving yourself a challenge, then this is the game for you. Performance, bugs, and balance concerns, again, should be something to keep in mind. Now, if you're a solo player or a quester, if you're looking for a really good story, absolutely. The game has an insane amount of questing content to get lost in, and it is something that they add to constantly. But again, just keep in mind that the quests are not difficult, so if you're looking for challenging quests, you will not find it here. Finally, if you're looking for like something like player housing, I'm going to give a resounding yes. ESO's houses are not only cosmetic, but they're functional. And I've seen people make some really crazy stuff in the game, and it's incredibly easy to get lost in. So if you are someone that loves player housing, ESO is definitely one of the best player housing systems that I've seen out of an MMO. Now, ESO is it's a great game for a casual player. If you're looking for an MMO that you can jump into, have some fun on, and then take a break and have your account not feel like it's behind when you come back, the game is great. If you're into housing and story quests, you will also love the game. If you're a player looking for a more hardcore endgame raiding, PvP, or dungeons experience, the game is good, but I do want to leave you with a piece of advice from a long-term ESO player, myself. ESO is what you make of it. You need to go into your ESO journey understanding that the game does have performance issues with its end game. If you don't take it too seriously and just enjoy the game for what it is, you're going to have a good time. However, if you start to get really serious with the game and start to take it like hyper seriously and kind of try hard, in my opinion, you're going to get very frustrated with the performance issues and they will eventually wear you down. But With that being said, I do think ESO is definitely an MMO that's worth trying despite its faults. The game has come a long way over its 7 years of existence, and if you haven't tried it since its release, it is 100% worth coming back to and giving another look. The game is very different than it was on launch. Now, if you do decide you want to get the game, you can get it cheaply from the link that I have in the description below, and there's more than enough content in the base game alone to get your feet wet and try things to see if it's worth it for you. And then if you decide you like it, you could always subscribe to ESO Plus and purchase the new chapter. But guys, with that being said, that is going to cover my Is ESO Worth Playing in 2021. Definitely a great game to check out, although, like I said, do keep in mind that the end game can have some performance issues. But if you guys did like this review, please smack a like on it. If you have any questions about ESO, feel free to leave a comment below. And guys, just a little thing about the channel, if you are new to the channel here, I am going to be moving more into a MMORPG first impressions, is it worth playing type of style for my channel. So if there's any MMO or game that you specifically want me to cover, feel free to leave a recommendation down below. I do have a bunch of MMOs installed on my computer that I plan to cover over the upcoming weeks and months. But if there's anything specific that you want to see, let me know. And if I see a certain request for a game, maybe I'll add that into the earlier parts of my queue and cover it sooner rather than later. But if you guys do want to see more MMORPG content, please hit that sub button as well as the bell to keep notifications on. And like I mentioned earlier in the video, if you do want any sort of character builds, guides, or help for the Elder Scrolls Online, I have a ton on my website, dotsgaming.com. Link can be found in the description below. But that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thank you all so much for stopping by. I do very much appreciate it. As always, I'm Dots Gaming, and I'll see you all in the next video.